Good morning. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to cover how the A-6 Intruder aircraft was employed from a place called Yankee Station in the Gulf of Tonkin off the coast of North Vietnam. The type missions that we flew, and a few details about how the A-6 system works. And I do that for a specific reason, so that when I play an audio tape of an actual bombing mission into the Hanoi area, you'll understand what the flight crew is doing and saying. Then I'll provide some details of one of my missions to Hanoi, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. In December 1967, we arrived in the Gulf of Tonkin. I was the commanding officer of Attack Squadron 75, better known as VA-75 or the Sunday Punchers. We were deployed in the Gulf from December of 1967 to June of 1968. We were flying the A-6 Intruder, not the prettiest airplane around, but it was hell on wings. A two-man, twin-engine, all-weather attack bomber, and in its day, it was the best all-weather attack bomber in the world, bar none. And when I say all-weather, I mean all-weather. We flew strikes in some of the worst winter monsoon weather of the war. And at times, the A-6s were the only aircraft flying from the attack carrier USS Kitty Hawk. Landings on Kitty Hawk, after a bombing mission in heavy monsoon rains, in zero visibility conditions, where you could see absolutely nothing outside the cockpit until after you touch down on deck. Those landings were just as exciting as any bombing mission I ever flew. Here's an A-6A configured with 28 500-pound bombs, and it carried 16,000 pounds of internal fuel. Because of high temperatures in the Gulf of Tonkin and usually light wind conditions, we normally carried just 22 500-pounders. And on missions to Hanoi, where you know you're going to be dodging lots of missiles and you want to keep your airspeed up, we normally kick down loaded to 18 500-pounders. We could also carry 13 1,000-pound bombs, and we did. 5 2,000-pound bombs, and we did. And that was one of our cleanest loads, lowest drag, or a variety of other ordnance. We had 15 A-6s on Kitty Hawk, 12 of the strike version, the A-6A, and 3 special mission A-6Bs, which I'll show you in the next slide. Here's the A-6B, specially configured to carry that 13-foot-long standard arm missile, the AGM-78A. ARM, A-R-M, stands for Anti-Radiation Missile. When fired, it homes in on enemy radars and surface-to-air missile sites. It's a long-range missile. If you fired it in a forward 45-degree quadrant, it would go 65 to 70 miles. You could also fire it in the turn mode. If that SAM site or surface-to-air missile site was behind you, you could fire it in the turn mode and hit it. Here was our home for 8 months deployment, the attack carrier USS Kitty Hawk. Great ship was decommissioned in mid-2009 after 48 years of service use. Here's Yankee Station, where we operated from. It's located just south of China's Hainan Island and off the coast of North Vietnam. VA-75 only flew strikes into the northeast sector of North Vietnam. We flew no strikes into South Vietnam. However, other aircraft from the Kitty Hawk did fly strikes down south. They helped the Marines break their siege at Khe Sanh and supported operations against the North Vietnamese during their Tet Offensive of 1968. Note the line going through Hanoi, that left line. In general, the Air Force took targets at Hanoi and targets to the left of that line. The Navy took targets at Hanoi and targets to the right of that line. Here is the 20-degree north latitude line. I show that because I'm going to mention it later on in the briefing. I want you to notice one thing about it. Most of the major cities in North Vietnam are located above 20 degrees north latitude. Normally, we had 2 aircraft carriers on station at all times. Occasionally, we had 3, but most of the time we had 2. Each carrier would fly a 12-hour period. One would fly from 10 in the morning till 10 that evening. The second carrier would fly from 10 that evening till 10 the following morning. And we much preferred that latter schedule because there was more nighttime. Why did we like it? Well, the aircraft was designed to fly at night and in bad weather. At nighttime, you could see surface-to-air missiles lift off a long distance away. Enemy gunners couldn't see you to shoot at you, and we never had problems with enemy MiG interceptors. They would never come out at night and come down to our altitude because we flew pretty low. We generally flew 1 to 2 missions a day per air crew. We had 20 pilots and 20 bombardier navigators in the squadron. They were paired up from training back in the States and stayed paired up as a team all the way through the combat deployment. Our normal cycle was 20 days combat flying and then 7 days off. 1 day to get into port in the Philippines, 5 days in port for a little rest and relaxation, and then 1 day to get back to Yankee Station. However, at the end of our first 20-day period of combat flying, our relief wasn't there. The Navy ship USS Pueblo had been captured by the North Koreans, and our relief, the USS Enterprise, was up in Korean waters. So we ended up flying 61 continuous days of combat flying without a break. The air war against North Vietnam was different than any prior conflict. Why was it different? Surface-to-air missiles. This is the first time U.S. forces had encountered surface-to-air missiles in combat. SAMs changed the nature of the air war. It forced us down from higher altitude to lower altitude where we had better turning performance against those missiles. But by coming down to lower altitude, it made us much more vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire and small arms fire. We participated in Operation Rolling Thunder, the name of the air warfare campaign against North Vietnam. It was characterized by not a full-scale bombing campaign, but a gradual escalation. We had lots of minor targets of little worth or significance, suspected truck parks, ferry crossings, road intersections, cave storage, small bridges, things like that. Here's an example of one of those minor targets, in which we did day visual 45-degree dive bombing on a road segment of Highway Route 15, a dirt road. Now that is usually that type target's usually a waste of the capabilities of the A6, but that's what we were tasked to do occasionally. Later on in our deployment, we got some better targets, thank goodness. Power plants, smaller industrial plants, rail yards, airfields, radio communication stations, and some port facilities. Here's an example in this next slide of one of the better targets, a good night A6 target. You can see it on radar, the Wong B thermal power plant. And this photo shows the results of 3 night A6 strikes against this target. And all 3 bomb strings went right through the center of the target. Just when we're doing some great work on these better targets, Washington decreed on 31 March 1968 there'd be no more bombing above 20 degrees north latitude. All the good targets are above 20 degrees north latitude. Another bombing pause. We could not pick our own targets. We could only bomb targets on the list approved by the Pentagon and in some cases the White House. Talk about micromanaging a war. Our mission was to avoid excessive civilian casualties, interdict the flow of supplies going into South Vietnam to the Viet Cong, and destroy their industrial base and their air defenses. How did we try to accomplish that? Well, on good weather days, we flew alpha strikes. What's an alpha strike? Here's a typical alpha strike. 27 to 35 aircraft launching from Kitty Hawk, rendezvousing overhead, and proceeding as a single strike group to the same target or targets in close proximity. Here's the composition of that strike group. Here are the different aircraft. On the left-hand side, the A-6 and the A-4 aircraft, and on the right side is their different bomb loads. The Mark 84 are 2,000-pound bombs. The Mark 83s are 1,000-pound bombs, and the Walleye is a missile with a television-guided missile. Here are the Iron Hand aircraft that go after the active SAM sites with their Shrike and Standard Arm missiles. Here are the flak suppressors that go after the anti-aircraft sites that are firing at us in our dive bombing run. And they're dropping cluster bomb units on them. Here are the target combat air patrol aircraft. We take them along with us just in case enemy interceptors do show up over the target. They go after them. The A-6s led all alpha strikes in Air Wing 11 on Kitty Hawk. After rendezvousing overhead Kitty Hawk, the strike group would climb to 15,000 feet and proceed to the target. Approaching the target, they would descend to 10,000 feet and start jinking back and forth, changing heading and altitude to avoid anti-aircraft fire. Abeam the target, the strike leader would roll the entire strike group into a 45-degree dive bombing run, releasing their bombs at 5,000 feet and pulling out straight and level at 3,500 feet. No one liked alpha strikes, because you had as much probability of running into another aircraft as you did getting shot down by the North Vietnamese. Fortunately, we didn't have that much good weather. We only had about 8 to 10 alpha strikes the entire deployment. At night or bad weather, we flew single-plane A-6 Intruder strikes doing low-level system bombing on radar, like the ones to Wang B thermal power plant. Any weather, good weather or bad. We did SAM suppression with our A-6B Standard Arm aircraft, and we did AMTI work, Airborne Moving Target Indicator work, one of the better missions for the A-6, which I'll cover in the next 2 slides. Here's a rather poor photo of the radar scope in the A-6. Now, in the AMTI mode, when you turn that AMTI switch on in the cockpit, the radar cancels all radar returns except from moving targets. Here's a picture with the AMTI mode turned on. Looks like a busy highway, lots of vehicle traffic. We would turn to line up on that column of vehicles, turn our track radar on to lock on to one of them. That would give us height above the target for the bombing solution. And then we would drop a string of bombs or other weapons on those trucks. Very effective work for the A-6. We did lots of AMTI work. Here's a view of the A-6 from above, side-by-side seating, pilot on the left, bombardier navigator on the right. Now I'm going to stop here for just a minute because I want to cover a few things in the cockpit that made the A-6 such a capable aircraft in any condition, particularly at night and in bad weather. This is a view of the cockpit in the A-6 from the pilot's side, and the instruments inside that red rectangle are my flight instruments. When you're catapulted off the ship at night, there are usually no visual references outside the cockpit. And the only way you know which way is up is to scan all of those instruments in that red rectangle. Right in the center of that red rectangle is my primary attitude reference, the Visual Display Indicator, or the VDI. It's a computer-generated display, and the A-6 was the only aircraft with this type display. It performs three important functions for the pilot. First, it provides a stabilized inertial platform where the horizon remains parallel to the surface of the Earth regardless of what the aircraft's doing. So I always know which way is up. Second, it's the means by which the bombardier navigator provides steering information to the pilot, to the next checkpoint, or to the target. That triangular shape in the center of the VDI is the pathway in the sky. If the pathway is off to the right, that means the next checkpoint or the target is off to the right. If the bombardier navigator says, take steering, you turn to the right and keep turning until that pathway moves back in the center of the display, and then you roll out of your turn and you're headed to the next checkpoint or to the target. Third, as the aircraft closes the target, the bombardier navigator steps the computer into attack, and it starts rapidly calculating bombing solutions. And this black bar appears on the display. The black bar is a signal for the pilot to depress the trigger on his control stick that he's using to fly the aircraft with. As you close the target, that black bar moves vertically down the display, and when it disappears on the bottom, the weapons are released automatically. Couple of more things about the VDI. In VA-75, the bombardier navigator always started alignment of the inertial platform. In our sister squadron on Enterprise, the ground crew in VA-35, the A-6 squadron on Enterprise, could start alignment of the inertial platform. And that had some implications for one of my flights to Hanoi, which I'll cover later. One last thing about the VDI. Those circular black spots that you see continuously flow from the horizon and disappear off the bottom of the VDI. For the pilot, it looks like those spots are coming toward you. And for me, it completely eliminated vertigo. It's like looking out of a window. I used to occasionally get vertigo flying the ordinary gyro display in the A4 Skyhawk, but never had vertigo with the VDI display in the A6. That is important if you have to avoid SAMs at night. On a strike to the capital city of Hanoi, North Vietnam, you are looking at 21 surface-to-air missile sites. 17 of them were active, and they did move them around from time to time. Those missiles were the Russian SA-2 guideline missile, radar guided with no infrared heat-seeking capability. Welcome to the capital city of Hanoi. This slide shows the anti-aircraft order of battle at Hanoi in February of 1968. Those gun symbols you see are not individual gun barrels. Each gun symbol is an anti-aircraft site with 5 to 7 gun barrels at each location. Hanoi was the most heavily defended city in the history of air warfare. The brown ones are 105 millimeter, strictly high altitude weapons. The blue are 85 millimeter, medium to high altitude. The red are 37 or 57 millimeter, low to medium altitude weapons. The yellow are automatic weapons, strictly low altitude stuff, and they are all over the place. Unfortunately, when I was making up this slide, I ran out of yellow ink. Here's our target for the night, the Yen Vien Railroad Classification Yard, 3.8 miles northeast of Hanoi. It's right on the main road and rail lines coming in from China, and as you can see, there's lots of anti-aircraft defenses around that target. Now, beside the flight crew voices, you're going to hear 3 sounds on this tape that I'm going to play. We had a receiver in the A6, and you can hear the sounds of radar. And the sounds are distinctly different depending upon the function of the radar. The first sound that you're going to hear is the Russian anti-aircraft radar that's tracking the aircraft. It's an annoying screeching sound. Some flight crews call it the searchlight, and its nickname is fire can.
The searchlight.
The second sound is the Russian SAM tracking and guidance radar, and it sounds like crickets. The third sound is a missile warning receiver in the A6. It's a warbling tone, and when it goes off, a large red warning light flashes right in your eye, and it means there's a missile airborne, it's receiving guidance information, and it's coming toward you. When the missile gets close, you take evasive action. Full throttle, drop chaff, and do a high G turn, a very tight turn. Chaff is strips of aluminum foil. We have chaff dispensers in the A6. When you activate it with your little finger on the throttles, it kicks out canisters of chaff on both sides of the aircraft right into the exhaust of the jet engines. And when those canisters hit the exhaust of the jet engines, they break open and it disperses the chaff. What does that do? It puts a great big blob on the surface-to-air missile radar operator's scope, and hopefully those missiles coming at you will explode on the chaff and not on the aircraft. Now, in the interest of brevity, I'm only going to play a small portion of this mission recording, the run-in to the target. The flight crew on this mission was pilot Lieutenant Commander Jerry Fink and his bombardier navigator Lieutenant Fred Hewitt of Attack Squadron 75. It's 1:30 at night. The aircraft's at 800 feet, and as soon as he crosses this next little checkpoint here, that's an outcropping of karst. It's an outcropping of rock, 500 feet tall, so he's going to cross that at 800 feet. As soon as he crosses it, he's going to descend to 300 feet. And you note they're using karst as a checkpoint to and from the target. As soon as they turn inbound to the target, after they cross that karst, the missile warning receiver goes off, and 2 SAM missiles are sighted at 12 o'clock coming toward the aircraft. Oh, one more thing. As we approach the release point, you're going to hear the pilot say, "I'm going to start bringing it up." He's got low drag bombs aboard. When you drop low drag bombs, they stay right below the aircraft all the way to impact. So you want to be 1,000 feet above them when they go off. Okay, here we go.
I want steering again. Okay, just hold what you've got. Hold what you've got. It's centered up, actually. That might be partially the problem. Okay, the steering is now cycled. You're ready to go into the target. Roger. I got the last to the left. Okay, I see him. He's coming. In fact, there's 2 of them, Jerry. There's 2. He's 1 behind him. Phase bias, just about 1,000 feet under the right wing. It's clear. Take heading of 204. 204, Jerry. 204, if you can give it to me. Steering is coming back. Steering is coming back. 204 is good. 204 is good. I'm on my aim point. I'm in attack, Jerry. It's looking good. I'm on aim point 1. I've updated. It's fine. Okay, we're 300 feet now. Right, 300 feet. Okay, I'm going to start bringing it up right now. When I tell you to release, to move that thing to down, do it. Not now. Say again? Not yet. Okay, we're getting shot at. You better believe it. Should be pretty soon now, Jerry. Okay, now. Okay. Come on. Your heading is left. Boy, they're shooting the shit out of it. Okay, we're here. Heading is left. Heading is left. Heading is left to 085. Okay, I see one missile. He's going high. Steady out 085. No threat right now. 085 is your heading. 085.
And the rest of the flight back to the ship was uneventful. That was a typical mission into the Hanoi area. I had the pleasure of flying 2 missions into Hanoi in February of 1968. One on 10 February to Hanoi Radio Communication Station in about 3.3 miles southeast of Hanoi. And on 24 February, one to the Hanoi port facilities right in downtown Hanoi. Both were very interesting flights, but the port facility strike had some interesting twist to it, so I'm going to relate the details of that strike. 2 days before the strike, on 22 February, the Enterprise returned from Korean waters to Yankee Station, and the Kitty Hawk departed for QB Point in the Philippines for some well-deserved rest and relaxation. The next day, on 23 February, we were within sight of the Philippines. Everybody's getting dressed to go on liberty, and a message came in from Commander Task Force 77. And that message said to execute a strike against the Hanoi port facilities. And because the Enterprise had only been on station for 1 day, make it a joint strike from Enterprise. So we launched 2 aircraft for Enterprise, landed aboard that afternoon, and did our mission planning with the A6 crews from Attack Squadron 35 on Enterprise. Here's a picture of the Hanoi port facility target with the Red River flowing to the southeast toward the Gulf of Tonkin and the port city of Haiphong. VA-35 was going to take the southern portion of the target and retire right up the center of the Red River until north of the city and then head for home. VA-75 was going to take the northern portion of the target. We were not going to follow VA-35 exit route because we figured everybody's going to be firing over the center of the Red River. We're going to exit right over the center of Hanoi at 400 feet. After mission planning, we had evening meal, hit the sack early. Reveille was at 12:30. We put on our flight gear and headed to the ready room, a VA-35 ready room, where we rebriefed the strike mission with the flight crews from VA-35. We manned aircraft at 0200 in the morning, and we launched at 0230. I'm on the starboard catapult of Enterprise. I'm at full power with both engines. And then I turned on my wing lights to indicate to the catapult officer that I'm ready for launch. Here is what happened to my primary attitude reference as we went down the catapult track. It turned upside down. First time that ever happened to me. Why did it happen? It happened because the ground crew on the Enterprise aligned our inertial platform in the polar mode. They put one switch in the wrong position. You never use the polar mode unless you're in the polar regions. That is, above 65 degrees north or south latitude, the Arctic circles. We happen to be at 19 degrees north latitude. So by aligning us in the polar mode at 19 degrees north latitude, as we started moving down the catapult track, it created high velocity errors in the system and the platform tumbled. Fortunately, I didn't follow that VDI or I would have hit the water inverted in front of the ship. As we went down the catapult track, my bombardier navigator saw the inertial platform warning light come on, and he yelled, "Platform, platform." I knew that meant we had platform problems. Besides, I just saw it turning upside down. I went right to my standby gyro, right here. It's about 3-inch gyro on our instrument panel. I rotated to a climbing attitude, put up my landing gear, and then my flaps as we accelerated, and then I climbed out in a standby gyro. I then called the ship, Enterprise, and I told them that my inertial platform tumbled on the catapult shot. They said, "Roger." I then headed for the A3 tanker that's overhead Enterprise at 10,000 feet. I was the last aircraft to tank, so because of my system problems, when I got up there, I moved to plug into the tanker, the A3 tanker, and all the tanker's lights went out. He had electrical failure and couldn't transfer fuel. Now, this is the second thing that happened in the first 10 minutes of this flight, and I'm beginning to think this wasn't going to be my night. With no working primary attitude reference and no extra fuel for the long flight to Hanoi, I thought I better talk the situation over with my bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Commander Mike Hall, and after our discussion, see what our options were, we decided to try to do an airborne alignment of the inertial platform. Never had to do one before, but it's a fairly simple procedure of flying straight and level for about 25 minutes with minimum turns to see if you could get a ready light on your inertial platform. After 22 minutes, we got a ready light. I did a quick check on the fuel. It's going to be close, but I thought we had enough to do it, and we headed into the mountains southwest of Hanoi. Letting down from 15,000 feet to 200 feet in the flatlands of the Red River Delta, I could hear the crickets chirping as the surface-to-air missile radar started tracking us. I leveled off at 200 feet and continued inbound. I'm doing about 350 knots, 407 miles an hour. And right about that first red arrow, I saw 2 SAMs lift off at 11 o'clock position, and our missile warning receiver starts blaring. I went to full throttle, told my bombardier navigator, I'm going down to 100 feet. While at 100 feet, even though it's a pitch black night, I saw objects outside the aircraft whizzing by, and I said to myself, gee, those must be farmhouses. Just then, my bombardier navigator says, you're level at 50 feet. I said, Roger, going back to 100 feet. When I'm flying that low, my bombardier navigator keeps his right eye on the radar, his left eye on my radar altimeter. Good man. He probably saved our butts. When the missiles were close enough, I thought I dropped chaff, rolled into an 89 degrees right bank, and pulled about a 6G climbing turn. One missile went right through the space we just vacated. The second exploded underneath the aircraft, shaking the aircraft pretty violently, put a small hole in our left wing, and my bombardier navigator said, you're heading to the target is 354 degrees. I rolled out on 354 and we're headed to the target. I'm accelerating to 450 knots, about 514 miles an hour. Right about this next red arrow here, there was so much anti-aircraft fire, I could see the complete outline of the Red River. I knew we're right on track for the target. I'm approaching the target at 400 feet with 18 high-drag Mark 36 destructor weapons. They are magnetic aerial mines, an area denial weapon. At 4:20 in the morning, I'm right here. I released my weapons, broke hard left over the center of Hanoi to an outbound heading of 239 degrees. on that outbound heading, there's lots of anti-aircraft sites firing. And at nighttime, it's mostly barrage. It is all barrage fire. They're firing straight up in the air because they can't see you. Straight up in the air, hoping you'd fly through it. And occasionally, one of the small guys, he kind of hoses it around, hoping to hit you. I picked 2 anti-aircraft sites and fly right in between them. After they passed, I had picked 2 more anti-aircraft sites, fly right in between them. And I continued that till we were got to the outskirts of Hanoi, where the anti-aircraft fire was starting to diminish. And I said to my bombardier navigator, "Hey, Mike, we're home free." No sooner than those words cleared my mouth than the missile warning receiver went off, and I immediately thought to myself, how am I going to know when to start to do my evasive maneuver? Those missiles are coming from behind us, and I can't see them. It didn't take long to find out. As those missiles approach the aircraft with that long rocket plume, it starts getting light in the cockpit. I said, I think it's time. I rolled into 90 degrees of bank at 400 feet, dropped chaff, pulled a 6 to 6.5 G turn to the right. Through 90 degrees of turn, I reversed my turn to the left, dropped more chaff, and in that second turn, 1 missile went over us. The second missile exploded underneath us in a brilliant fireball that just about wiped out my night vision. I rolled wings level, headed for the mountains, and we landed back aboard Enterprise at 5 o'clock in the morning with 15 minutes of fuel remaining. After landing on Enterprise, we headed for the Air Intelligence Center where we debriefed the mission, and I found out that only 2 aircraft made it to target. The CO, commanding officer of VA-35, Commander Glenn Coleman, made it to target, and I made it to target. Commander Coleman was killed about a month later. The other aircraft from VA-75 had radio failure, and standard operating procedures were, if you did not have a radio, you did not go on the mission. The other aircraft from VA-35 had system problems and dropped his bomb 12 miles short of target. The Enterprise started flying again at 10 o'clock the next morning, and the VA-35 maintenance crew showed up at my aircraft with some duct tape. And they put duct tape on the bottom over the hole in the bottom of my wing, ran it up over the leading edge, and then up over the hole in the top of the wing. And we launched for Naval Air Station QB Point in the Philippines, where the Kitty Hawk was located. And after landing, we changed clothes and we headed for the Officers Club. Now, there happened to be a large party going on in the Officers Club, a 1,000 Stinger party, in honor of the 5 guys from Air Wing 11 that were shot down in our 61-day line period. And 2 of those guys were mine. Everybody chipped in money. We bought 1,000 Stingers, and they covered the bar. And when I walked into the bar, here's about what it looked like. And I had my share. We did have some aircraft losses. VA-75 lost 1 aircraft to a SAM and the second one to anti-aircraft fire, and we lost 4 aircrew members. Our sister squadron on Enterprise lost 6 aircraft, 50% of her A6As. They lost 12 aircrew members, but one or two of them came back as a POW in 1973 when they were released. They did lose their commanding officer and their executive officer. Both of these squadrons, VA-75 and VA-35, were from the Naval Air Station Oceana, Virginia, in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So we knew them. With the loss of that squadron leadership in VA-35, my wife Rita took the wives of VA-35 under her wing and helped them through a very difficult period. Now, even though we had those aircraft losses, we actually had it pretty good. We flew in an air-conditioned cockpit, got 3 hot meals a day, slept between clean sheets at night. The ones that had it difficult in that war were the ones that had to fight it on the ground, and my hat is off to them. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.